Are you ready? From Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio, this is All Access Med School Admissions. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and I'm bouncing back and forth because this music is kind of funky. I can't help it. So, 2, 3, 4. Hey, I'm a drummer. It's in my blood. So, hey, listen, I can't thank you enough for making this podcast a part of your listening life. Hey, because of you, it's getting recognized on Apple Podcasts in the science category. Your school requests have made it easier for me to approach schools about coming on the show. And the last 3 months since I've launched this project, I'm calling you the All Access Army now, have collectively downloaded these episodes over 20,000 times. It's just incredible. So thank you. Thank you for helping me spread the word about this, special project. I love hearing from listeners. So if you have an admissions related question or have a medical school that you'd like me to try and get on the show, or you just want to say hi, then email me at allaccess@case.edu. Hey, before we jump into today's episode, which I'm super stoked to get to you, let me tell you some of the other shows I'm working on. I've got a back to school episode coming shortly where we're going to kind of deviate away from the regular programming and talking with a medical school, and we're going to take it a little bit different direction, and we're going to have a conversation with a pre-med advisor from the University of Chicago. Now, this guest that I have coming on in a week or so used to be the director of admissions at a medical school, and then made a career change and went to becoming a pre-health advisor. So her perspective on pre-med issues is going to be really unique. I think you're going to like to hear from her. Then we're going to keep it in Chicago, and I quite coincidentally have the admissions team at the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine teed up for a future episode. And I'm also working with the Dartmouth Geisel School of Medicine admissions team. So that's hopefully coming down the road soon too. Some of you have sent me some suggestions of other medical schools to try and get on the show. And I've got some feelers out with some other people too. So, hey, keep tuning in. I hope to keep bringing you more of these people to talk to or to hear from. But hey, today we're taking you back to Boston, to what is arguably one of the most widely known medical schools in the globe, and that's Harvard Medical School. So let me just give you some background on this institution. Harvard Medical School is located in the Longwood Medical area of Boston, Massachusetts, so it's very much an urban setting. Harvard Medical School, or HMS, you're going to hear my guest and I refer to Harvard Medical School as HMS quite a bit throughout this episode. They were founded in 1782, and it is one of the oldest medical schools in the United States. HMS is also ranked number 1 among research-oriented medical schools according to the 2020 rankings of U.S. News and World Report. Unlike most medical schools, HMS does not operate in conjunction with a single hospital, but is directly affiliated with 16 teaching hospitals in the Boston area, which my guest and I discussed during our conversation and how this plays into their interview process as well. HMS is a private institution and accepts applicants from Canada, international students, and applicants who have the DACA status. Additionally, there is not a state residency requirement to apply to Harvard Medical School. In 2018, the medical school received 6,917 completed applications and interviewed 889 applicants for a class size of 165. 58% of their 2018 entering class were comprised of women, and 24% self-identified as underrepresented in medicine. Based on the MSAR data for the 2018 class, 76% of incoming students had community service or volunteer experiences, 82% had physician shadowing or clinical observation experiences, 89% had medical or clinical community service or volunteer experiences, 27% had some type of paid or medical or clinical employment, and 98% had research or lab experience. Harvard Medical School has two curricular tracks called Pathways, and another is called the HST, or the Health Sciences and Technology program, which is a collaboration between Harvard and MIT. And my guest and I, we discussed that a little bit during our conversation. The Pathways curriculum was instituted in 2015, and we talk about how that is structured too. So my guest today that we're going to be talking to us about their curriculum and admissions process is Melissa Friedman. She's been a friend of mine for going on about 4 years now, and we've attended some meetings together. We've traded some phone calls and emails and stuff like that, and she's just a lot of fun to hang out with. So I think you're going to really like her too. So let me tell you about her. Melissa Friedman serves as Director of Admissions at Harvard Medical School. She joined the HMS admissions team in December of 2015 after spending nearly 12 years in the admissions office at Tufts University School of Dental Medicine, where she held multiple roles, including Director of Admissions there. Melissa currently serves on the AMCAS Advisory Committee and was active nationally in the American Dental Education Association, or the ADEA, where she chaired the admissions, financial aid, and student affairs section. In both of these roles, Melissa has made numerous local and national presentations on medical and dental school admissions. She's a graduate of Colby College with a bachelor's in human development and Tufts University with a master's in educational studies. She's a native of Boston, and when she's not in the admissions office, she can be found spending time with her husband and her daughter, exploring all the great things the city of Boston has to offer. So, okay, there you go. Are you ready? I hope so, because here we go. We're going to go inside Harvard Medical School. Well, good morning, Melissa. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really am so excited to have you on. Thank you so much.
Of course, Christian. Thanks for having me.
Well, I have been waiting. I was so excited when you responded that you were willing to come on and do this episode. So I think there's probably a ton of questions we could go over, but we could be here all day talking about Harvard Medical School. But I think what's important, first of all, let's talk about is we just read your bio to everyone. I always like to have let's humanize the admissions people a little bit. And, how did you get started in admissions? How did you choose this career pathway? Because you've been doing it for a while.
I have. So it's actually kind of a funny story. When I went off to college, I never thought that there were people that worked in admissions. It just never dawned on me. And I greatly enjoyed my college search. I felt like I learned a lot about myself and who I was, and felt that I really found the best fit for me for an undergraduate institution. And so I started off volunteering in my undergrad admissions office, and it always seemed like that was the place I wanted to be. I really enjoyed talking with prospective students, and I felt that I was pretty good at it too. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I actually went off to college thinking I wanted to go to medical school. So working in admissions was a really different idea for me. And it wasn't really something that I thought about until a friend of mine said, you seem really good at this. Why wouldn't you consider doing this for a career? And so that was when the sort of idea was planted into my head. And come to find out, I was much happier talking with people about schools and finding out what they wanted and their hopes and their dreams for the future. And it was just a much better fit for me. And so I started off doing some internships while I was in college, spent more time in my undergrad's admissions office. And then when I graduated, had my first job where I was working in a private boarding school in central Massachusetts. And from there, I spent 4 years and then moved on to Tufts University School of Dental Medicine where I spent almost 12 years there, and was fortunate to be the director of admissions there for a little over 4 years. And then an opportunity became available at Harvard, and it was one that I couldn't pass up. And so I've been here since about 2015.
Mm-hmm. It's about 4 years now. So what have you enjoyed about, first of all, I guess I should ask, what was the transition like? Was it difficult to go from dental admissions to medical admissions, or was it just a different application process, but just kind of but similar, but different?
It is sort of similar but different. I mean, with dental schools, you still have the centralized application service where applicants are submitting their applications to ADSAS, which is the equivalent of AMCAS. So that was not too much of a learning curve. But of course, when you change institutions, even though in my case they were right down the road from one another, there was certainly a learning curve. So now almost 4 years in, I'm feeling like I have a good handle of things here at HMS.
What have you found that you enjoyed most about working in your new position there, relatively new position at Harvard? What was it like? It was probably a little intimidating, maybe coming in, wasn't it?
Of course.
Yeah.
It is.
So
Yeah.
what have you found you really enjoy now?
Well, I think first and foremost, when you say the name Harvard Medical School, it obviously brings about some, trepidation, and people think, oh my goodness, it's one of the best medical schools in the world.
Right.
But people are really down to earth. And I think that has been the most gratifying for me, just seeing our students and getting to know them. They're amazing people. And our faculty as well are incredibly dedicated. The faculty that work in our admissions process are some of the hardest working individuals I have ever met. And they do what they do because they really love it. And they feel very passionate. So that has been very rewarding for me.
I can attest to say that, I've gotten to know you and Dr. Mayer and Dr. Hundert and some other people in the medical education division at Harvard Med. And everybody is, like you say, very down to earth and nice as can be. Really just great people. So I can only echo what you just said about that, because that's very true. So you're a native of Boston, and you told us that you like to do things in Boston with your family. So what are some of the fun things that you like to do or like if people are coming in town, you're like, oh my gosh, you've got to check this out?
Oh, there's so much to do in Boston. I'm biased because I grew up in the Boston area. But I think Boston is a great place to live and to study. It's summertime here in Boston, which is a great time to be in the city, of course. So this summer, I've really enjoyed spending time with my family outdoors, getting out on the water. The great thing about being in Boston is we are right on the coast. So we have access to Boston Harbor and are a very short drive or train ride away from some great beaches. But also the mountains are pretty close by too. So you can spend, time either at the beach, or you can go a short distance and go hiking, go for bike rides. We love taking our bikes out along the Esplanade, which runs along the Charles River. Okay. I have a 7-year-old daughter, so that's about our speed at this point in time, but we love sort of making a day of it and going out and bringing a picnic and just enjoying the weather while we can. But, really year round, it's a great place to be. We have some great sports teams to cheer on.
Yeah, you guys have a parade like every other week.
We do. It does seem that we have been pretty fortunate, but I think it makes up for all of the years that we were sort of patiently waiting for these championships.
Oh my gosh. What about last question about this, and then we'll jump into the curricular things is is there something that you feel people are surprised to learn about you?
I guess maybe that I did want to go to medical school at one point in time. I think that, now that I'm sitting on the other side of the desk, it's kind of ironic. I never thought that this is where I would end up. But I think, doing what I do now and seeing sort of the myriad of students that come through the admissions process, I realize now that there are many paths to medical school. And I think that's something that I always like to highlight to applicants, that there's not one sort of recipe for success or for gaining admission to medical school, that for some applicants it takes a really sort of different path, and that's okay, and not to give up.
Absolutely. Well, I thought we'd start off by talking about the curriculum and at Harvard Med. And I think what's important to kind of set the stage is that there are two parallel curricula. There's the pathways and there's the HST. So before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of some of the highlights of the curricula, can you, Melissa, kind of tell us what's the difference between pathways and HST?
Sure. Well, Pathways is our largest cohort of students. We have 135 students who enroll every year in the Pathways curriculum. And Pathways is a relatively new curriculum. It was unveiled in the fall of 2015. So we just graduated our first class that went through the full 4 years of Pathways. And Pathways is sort of the more traditional approach, although it really does differ in sort of timing of things. And it's really a sort of flipped classroom model in the first year, where students are learning in a very interactive format in small groups. Mm-hmm. Health Sciences and Technology, are also known as HST, is a smaller program for 30 students every year. And this is a program that is run in conjunction with MIT. So students in HST are taking classes here at Harvard Medical School and also across the river in Cambridge at MIT. It is still the full 4-year experience. Students graduate with an MD from Harvard Medical School, but the curriculum is more quantitative based, and it's geared more for individuals who may want a career as a physician scientist. Mm-hmm.
So those HST students are taking some courses at MIT that are graduate courses with graduate students at MIT, right?
Yeah, there's some overlap so that they're taking classes with MD students and also some students in other degree programs.
So HST is probably for the student who really loves research, but
most of the students, have a significant background in research.
But maybe they don't have an educational goal or a career goal of doing an MD PhD, right? So this is kind of in the middle. It's like kind of a boutique.
Not necessarily. No? So MD PhD, you can be in the MD PhD track whether you're in Pathways or in HST. So it is quite common for HST students to have to be in the MD PhD track, but not all of the HST students are.
Oh, that's interesting.
And likewise, Pathways are it's possible for Pathways students to be in the MD PhD track as well.
Yeah. Okay. So before we hit record, Melissa had said this could be a little complicated talking about the curricula. And I can see why. I mean, there's a lot of different pathways you can take as a student.
Exactly.
But I think one thing I want to mention, and I'm going to put a link on the show site, is I watched a great video. It's about 10 minutes long by Dr. Hundert, who's the Dean for Medical Education. And he walks through each year of like how this works at HMS. And so I would encourage people, if they want to get into really kind of the nuts and bolts of the curriculum across all 4 years, watch this video. And fun fact, Dr. Hundert was the president of Case Western for a while ago. He was a president here, and so now he's at Harvard. So I've known Dr. Hundert a little bit. But no, he has a great video. So if you want to go into some of the nitty gritty of the curriculum, I'll put that link there and you can watch that. But so I want to go back to, so let's kind of talk about pathways a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned it's a lot of, I think you said it was a lot of small group learning, flipped classroom. It's primarily the first year that they're doing this pathways part of it, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So,
so
what's that kind of like?
Sure. So the Pathways curriculum encompasses the full 4 years, but the first year of the curriculum, or year and few months, is done in sort of this flipped classroom, case-based collaborative learning experience. And what that basically means is that when students arrive to HMS, and even before they arrive, they are assigned to one of 5 of our academic societies.
Okay.
And it's important to note that all of the HST students are assigned to the London Society, and that's because they take their curriculum together, so they're separate.
Okay.
For the Pathway students, all 135 Pathway students are then randomly divided into one of 4 academic societies. And what this does is this breaks the class down into smaller groups. There are faculty members that are affiliated with each of the societies that serve as advisors and instructors throughout the curriculum. And each society has what's called a learning studio, and that is where most of the instruction takes place. So in a learning studio, you would have about 35 or so Pathway students. Joining them are also first-year dental students from the Harvard School of Dental Medicine. So it's important to note that medical students and dental students for the first year take their classes together. And in fact, during the first year, it's very hard to tell the medical students and the dental students apart because they are so integrated. So within these learning studios, that's where the classes are taking place. And so for the most part, our students are in classes from 8 a.m. till about 12:30 or so, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And it's a flipped classroom model, which means that students are doing all of their reading and their prep work prior to coming into class, and then they're working in small groups together with their classmates to fully grasp the material and work through problem sets and so forth. So it's a very interactive, collaborative type of environment. It's very exciting, and our students have really enjoyed it since this curriculum was unveiled. It does require, though, that students attend class. So our attendance rates are pretty high because, if you are working in a small group of 4 students, and if you were to walk by our learning studio while a class was in session, what you would see is sort of these tables that are pushed together and 4 students working together. So if one student is missing, that not only impacts them, but it impacts the others in the group as well. So, our students are attending class every day and working together. And then Wednesdays are a slightly different experience for students in the Pathways curriculum, and that's when our Practice of Medicine course takes place. And that is when students are not necessarily in the learning studios, but are sort of learning how to be a doctor. So they're not necessarily focusing on those foundational building blocks of sort of the science behind medicine, but maybe talking about the ethics of medicine or talking about interacting with a patient. And so those are done in conjunction with their hospital sites. And students are assigned to one of 4 hospital sites here at HMS, which is where they will do their Practice of Medicine course, but also where they will spend the principal clinical experience, which is sort of the intensive
like the
hospital
second year
experience, which starts about 14 months after students matriculate.
One thing I wanted to ask was, are the students, the dental students and medical students, are they in that group of 4?
Yes.
Or is it just
so there are, so it is, Harvard School of Dental Medicine is is the smallest dental school in the country. So they have about 35 students every year. So their students are sort of mixed in with the medical school students. And so they are, they're not sort of sequestered by themselves. They are interacting with the medical school students. So you truly can't tell who is who.
Yeah. So you could be in a group with a dental student and it's like, oh, like you're a dental student. I didn't know that, but it's not a big deal.
Exactly.
So, exactly. So on Wednesdays, they go to the hospital. Can students submit a preference as to where they want to go for that Wednesday, or like what type of physician they could be paired with? Or is it just like, hey, you're assigned to go to the Brigham. You're assigned to go to Beth Israel.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the most part, they are not, or entirely, they're not taking requests. The only caveat is that we do have a small group of students who are in what's known as our Cambridge Health Alliance, PCE. And this is a different type of PCE experience. It's more longitudinal based. And Cambridge Health Alliance is a small community medical center. So it's different than sort of the big Beth Israel, Mass General, Brigham and Women's, which are the 3 other PCE sites.
Okay.
So in the summer prior to matriculation, our registrar's office will send out a notice to all of our incoming students asking students who are interested in being in the Cambridge Health Alliance PCE to opt into a lottery. And so if students have an interest in Cambridge Health Alliance, they would submit their name, and then the registrar fills the available seats based out of a lottery system. Cambridge Health Alliance is really popular with a lot of students, but particularly for students who may have an interest in going into primary care or something along those lines.
Yeah. While you were talking, I pulled up their website and I was like, a lot of primary care. So I could see how that would appeal to those students that are interested in that.
Yeah. And so it's a different experience. For the other sites, as I had mentioned, Mass General, Brigham and Women's, and Beth Israel Deaconess, they are randomly assigned to those sites. And so, it's important to note that because a student is assigned to one site does not mean that they will not have an experience with that hospital at some other time during their HMS career. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when students return from the PCE and in the 3rd and 4th year, they're encouraged to do some of their other internships at those other sites. So rather than going back to their PCE site, go to one of the other hospital sites.
Yeah. So you had mentioned that classes kind of wrap up around 12:30 on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. What do you see students do?
For the most part,
there might be some stuff in the afternoon from time to time, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What do you find that most students are doing in the afternoons? Like, what have you observed them or heard that they do in the afternoons or evenings?
Our students are very, very active.
Time.
Yeah. So it's really up to the individual student. We have our student body is incredibly active, and there's lots of student organizations that exist. And so students are doing those things. There's also a lot of our first year students assist us in the admissions process. And so they serve as tour guides or lunch hosts. They're meeting with applicants, or they are, taking some time for themselves and exercising. That's really important. We want students to be healthy. And, they're studying too, or they're out sort of, engaging in other activities.
Can students start research in the first year if they want to start dabbling in something with that those afternoons that are available, can they reach out to different researchers
Sure.
at Harvard and maybe start a project or start looking at something?
Sure, they can. And there are students who do that. I will say that the first year is fairly intensive. And so, it might not be the best thing for every student, but we definitely have students who do.
I think that's important to to emphasize that like we have a similar curricula in that the afternoons look to be open, and people don't like to call it free time. Like it's there's a lot of opportunities for medical students, but like you're going to be working pretty hard. So
right.
I think some people see that like, oh, they're done at 12:30 or around then. So the rest of the day is, and it's hard, I think, as a student, because you're now where you really want to be. It's kind of like a candy store. You could do research, or you can do some electives, or you could get involved in some activity. But at the end of the day, you still have to have your work done and be ready for tomorrow morning.
Exactly.
So that's a big responsibility.
Yeah. And even more so with our Pathways curriculum, because it is so interactive and students are participating. You're not hiding sort of in a lecture hall with 130 other students and able to sort of be silent.
It's really hard to hide in a small group, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So when the students wrap up their first year and they make the progression to the second year, which is that principal clinical experience phase, this is when they're going into the hospitals for 12 months. And is there a course of study woven in through that 12 months too, to kind of integrate in still basic sciences and clinical sciences?
Yes, there's some sort of overarching coursework that takes place, but then students are, based at their hospital sites and are doing rotations through the various specialties. So not everyone is going through OB-GYN at the same time. It's dependent on that individual student's sort of schedule.
So you had said that our students are assigned the second year a hospital to go to, but then they can go explore their third and fourth year. Tell us about what happens in the third and fourth year then, because it sounds like the second year is pretty prescribed. Like you're going to be in the hospitals seeing medicine on a daily basis with the overarching basic science themes kind of continuing to be woven in and reinforced. What happens in the third and fourth year?
So really the third and fourth year is an opportunity for students to come back and really forge their own pathway. And so that's sort of where Pathways comes from. So the idea is that during the PCE experience, students will have identified sort of an area of interest and have a sense of what specialty it is they want to pursue in the future. And so the third and fourth years are an opportunity for students to dive more deeply into those specific areas. And so there are some advanced clinical electives that they are required to take, but there's a lot of choice in there. So students can sort of choose the pathway, so to speak, that best fits them. It's also important to note that many of our students will actually take 5 years to graduate. And that's not because they need to do any type of remediation or they're deficient in anything, but that's because they choose to add on an additional degree. And so as a student here at Harvard Medical School, you have the opportunity to go and pursue perhaps a Master's of Public Health through the Chan School, which is right next door to us, or, a degree through the Kennedy School. Or I have known students who have done degree programs with the School of Education, the Divinity School, and so forth. So there's lots of opportunities. And so depending on the program that they're doing, students will usually take time in between what would be the third and fourth year to pursue that additional degree program and then come back. Yeah,
so it's not really like a fifth year, because so typically students do that, you said, like after the third year? Or
in some cases, So in some cases, it's between the third and fourth year, what would traditionally be the third and fourth year. In some cases, it is it's sort of at the end in the fifth year. It really sort of depends on the program to which they're entering.
One question I think a lot of students ask is, what about global opportunities? Can students,
Sure.
what kind of opportunities do students have at HMS to go abroad?
Yeah, there's lots, and that's something that is very popular with our students. And we have an office that's known as our Scholars in Medicine office, and they exist for a variety of reasons and really serve as a resource for our students, but are very helpful for students who are interested in global health opportunities.
Oh, cool.
They will help put them in touch with faculty members and other organizations that are doing the work and sort of help them through that process. They even offer medical language courses so students can
really?
brush up on their Spanish, on their Mandarin, in anticipation of going on some of these trips, or even if they just want it for their general patient pool here. Sure. Stateside. So it's a great resource for our students.
Yeah. So where do students live? When medical students come to Boston to go to Harvard, where do they live around? I mean, because it's a very dense city and real estate's a premium. What's that like?
Yeah. We are very fortunate in that we have a dormitory right here on campus.
Okay.
So right across from the main teaching building is Vanderbilt Hall, which is our dormitory. And, I would say the majority, about 70 to 80% of first-year students live in Vanderbilt Hall. And so it's a great option for students who want to be close by and also want to be surrounded by their classmates. Sort of it adds a dimension to that. Harvard University also has lots of other opportunities in terms of graduate student housing. So the one thing that Vanderbilt Hall is not sort of equipped to handle is students that may be coming to campus with a partner or with a family.
I was just going to ask about that.
So for those students, there are other housing options available to them, more sort of apartment style and so forth, but that are sort of facilitated through Harvard University. And then, we are located downtown, and so there are lots of residential areas that are a short walk from campus. So while we see that the majority of our first-year students live in the dorm, many more tend to move out of the dorm and into apartments, either, mostly with roommates or maybe with their family after the first year. And certainly for students that might be assigned to Mass General, which is a little bit further away from us, they may choose to live closer to their hospital site for their PCE or the Cambridge Health Alliance, of course. Yeah. But, we're in a great city that's, pretty accessible by public transportation as well as biking, walking. So there's lots of great opportunities for students.
Just to kind of wrap up the curriculum here a little bit, what's something that there's undoubtedly there's a mystique about Harvard Medical School, kind of what you alluded to at the beginning of our conversation here. What's something that you wish people knew about HMS that they may not see on your website or in literature and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Harvard Medical School, I think, has this reputation or this mystique, as you said, as this big, large institution. And it's true. We are. We have lots of resources. We have 16 teaching hospitals, which is fabulous in terms of opportunities for our students. And I think some people can fear that it's an overwhelming environment or very cutthroat competitive. And that's really not the case.
That's good to hear.
Everyone is very down to earth. Our students are incredibly grounded. They're just like any other medical student out there. And our faculty are incredibly dedicated as well. And so I think the sense that the academic societies give in terms of the support that they give to students, And the fact that the class is broken down into these smaller groups really does foster a sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
And, it might be a little cheesy to say, but it does have a family-like atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's nice. I mean, because I would think that's important because from what I've seen in your data is that your students come from all over the country and other parts of the world.
They do.
They're not all from the Massachusetts area where family might be nearby. And so I think that's important. And I think that probably speaks to why so many first years move into that Vanderbilt Hall. Because one, it's probably easy because you don't know the city of Boston to go find good housing. But two, it builds that sense of community. You start meeting people in the same boat and we're all in this together. And here we go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think now, I mean, the next step that people want to know about is like, all right, what are you guys looking for? Like, what do people, like that's the next natural step. Now, what when people click submit, they click the submit button to Harvard Medical School, what happens after that? What's the screening process like?
Sure.
What things are you guys looking for? I mean, this is the questions we get all the time, right? When we talk to pre-med kids. So let's talk maybe what happens after they click submit.
Sure. So once AMCAS verifies an application, they are available to us. And one thing that's important to note at HMS, our secondary invitation process, we send secondaries to everyone who is verified through AMCAS. Okay. So I know at some schools there is some screening that takes place prior to the secondary being issued. And that's not the case for us at HMS. So on a daily basis, one of my team members is the one who's pressing the button and sending out the secondary invitations to all of our applicants. It's really once we receive the secondary application that sort of all of the work takes place. And we have a process, a very thorough process of review, whereby every application that is completed here is reviewed at least by 2 faculty members. Mm-hmm. So we are doing a holistic review of the application, regardless of GPA, MCAT scores. So we're looking very closely at every single application, which to me is just amazing. And so we're able to pick up on those things and really do feel that students are not falling through the cracks or applicants aren't falling through the cracks. So, there's not one thing that we're looking for. As you mentioned a little while ago, our students are coming to us from
for people
all over the place. Exactly. Yeah. I think everybody wants sort of this recipe or checklist, and these are the things I have to do, and then I'll get a positive response. And that's just not the case because our curriculum is so interactive. We really do believe that students learn best in a diverse community. So we want that sense of diversity in every sense of the word. So we don't want students all from the same institution or from the same geographic area. We don't want all of our students to look the same. We want them to have differing opinions and differing interests. And so, we're really just looking holistically at the application to get a sense of, who is this person? Where have they come from? Perhaps what challenges have they overcome? What have they done with the opportunities that have been presented to them? What opportunities have they created for themselves? And sort of what do they want to do? What does all of this mean to them? Why medicine? Why Harvard Medical School? And so we're trying to assess that through reading the applications, reading the personal statements, reading the letters of evaluation. It all becomes very important to our process.
So if each application is getting reviewed by 2 faculty members, is there a tiebreaker? Like if one faculty member says, yes, I'd like to interview them, I think I'd recommend interviewing, and the other one says, no, I don't recommend interview. There's discordance. Yeah. So is there a tie-breaking kind of system?
There is, yeah. So that's set up so that if, just as you said, we need two people to say, yes, we're going to interview them, or no, we're not going to interview them. And there is, someone who comes in those cases when there is sort of a differing of opinion to sort of give, his assessment.
Yeah. Okay. So we've established that there's not like a recipe or a secret batch of things that you guys are looking for in your applicants. And if they have these things, then all right, they've got the interview. But maybe are there characteristics or attributes that you're looking to tease out of an application that is important to HMS as future students that you're kind of looking for?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, intellectual curiosity is something that we're looking for. We want students who are just naturally curious about anything and everything. So we really want to see students who have identified a passion and really worked, pretty closely within that. But that can mean a lot of things for a lot of different people. So there's not sort of one thing that we're looking for. We're looking for evidence of compassion and empathy as well. We're looking for demonstrated leadership. And so that's either previous leadership positions or the ability to be in leadership positions in the future. And that doesn't have to be sort of academic leadership or related to medicine in some way. It can be, sort of a student body leader or starting an organization from scratch or, being an athlete. It takes a lot of different forms.
Yeah. How do you feel about medically related experiences? This comes up from time to time because sometimes it's hard for applicants to obtain these, shadowing physicians or doing work or volunteer work in hospitals. It's become a little more difficult, I think, in the last few years because rightfully so, because of HIPAA and other issues and hospital policies. So is this something that HMS feels is a must have, or can they get exposure some other way that you're looking for?
Yeah, so it certainly is more challenging, I think, just in sort of the type of world that we live in these days. But I think it is important because we want to know that our applicants have done their homework, that they know what they're getting into, and that they can articulate why medicine and why an MD versus the myriad of other sort of career paths that are out there. I think there is sort of this misconception amongst some applicants who think that they have to do shadowing and that is what we want. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, we will see students who will do shadowing and usually that is an entry point that sort of moves them along to other opportunities. So there's lots of different things that applicants can do that are related and give them sort of an experience within clinical medicine and interacting with patients and so forth. So I think it is definitely important, and it's something that we want to see, but it can also, be in lots of different ways.
And I think this is a question I probably have asked in every single episode, but I ask it on purpose because not for redundancy, but I want listeners to hear that, yes, this school says it, that school says it, and we're all, Harvard says it, Michigan, like we're all saying the same thing. Like, so just to kind of keep beating into the listeners' heads that like, it doesn't it can come in different forms, but yes, it's valued greatly by medical schools because just like what you said, Melissa, it's like, we want to see that you've done your homework. And it's the phrase that keeps coming up. You know what you're getting yourself into. Because there's probably nothing worse than having a student go to medical school and realize, I don't like this. And
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, now we have a problem. So
exactly.
One other thing I wanted to ask you, Melissa, before we segue into kind of like the interview day things, but when I was doing some research to prepare for this interview, I saw that in your prerequisites, You have a list of prerequisites, and it says that, but for the 2021 year, there's going to be some changes. I go to this link. And so is there something you'd like people to know about in anticipation of this prerequisite change? Is it a big change? Is it a little change?
No, it's really not a big change. And if anything, the requirements have actually become more flexible with these changes. So really, this is just, sort of after a periodic review of our curriculum, our students' performance, and so forth, it was determined that we did need to make a modification. And so this was a decision that was actually made last year. And because we know that applicants are planners and they need to know these things well in advance, we withheld sort of the implementation for another cycle. So it won't go into effect until next year. So students that are applying starting next spring for next year's or 2 years from now, entering class in 2021, really, the biggest changes is previously and currently we require a semester of calculus and statistics. And what we found is that we were one of the few schools out there that did require that. And so while we still are strongly encouraging students to take those courses, we recognize that there are lots of other ways that students can demonstrate their competency in those areas, such as from research or perhaps other coursework that was not specifically a calculus class or a statistics class. And so that was sort of the biggest requirement. We're also encouraging students to take coursework in the behavioral sciences, and I think we are, joined by many other institutions in sort of that move. So really, the requirements should not be too jarring or really prevent someone from applying.
On your secondary, is this where applicants indicate how they've achieved a competency in each one of these subjects, or is it just
that would come later?
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking for the coursework fairly, through our review process. And then when students come for an interview, that's when they sort of fill out some forms identifying how they plan to sort of meet those requirements based on their previous coursework.
I'm getting kind of in the weeds here, but I'm only asking because we get these kind of emails. But like, let's say we require 2 years of chemistry with organic chemistry and biochemistry. If a student comes from an institution where they've merged together, like say, instead of 2 years of general chemistry, they do it in a year and a half. How do they communicate that to you that I couldn't take 2 years of this? Like I couldn't. Do you want emails from them, or like how does that work?
They can do that. Certainly, we welcome if applicants have questions or concerns. They're certainly always welcome to reach out to our office. But the nature of how we are conducting our screening process is that the screeners get to know those institutions from which they're reviewing applications. So, the faculty who are reviewing the applications really know the curriculum at each of those schools pretty well. And schools also communicate with medical schools as well. So if there's been a change, I'm sure you receive, emails from institutions all the time notifying us of those changes. And of course, if we had any questions, we would get in touch with the applicants directly.
Yeah. The last question I have about the application process, and then we'll move on to the interview day, is do you accept updates from applicants after they've submitted their application? Like, hey, I have a paper that's been published, or just updates in general. Do you accept those?
Sure, we do. We do limit it to 2 updates, and applicants are able to upload those to our online portal themselves. And so applicants will do that. We limit it to 2 because we receive about 7,000 applications a year. So, if we were getting updates every day from some applicants, it would be pretty overwhelming. So, really the updates should be limited to very substantive updates.
Yes.
Certainly if an applicant is placed on the waiting list, though, later in the cycle, submitting updates are very pertinent and very helpful to us. We always like to know what our applicants are up to in case vacancies in the class become available.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that about updates that have substance, because I'm sure you get the similar emails. Like it's just, they just want to stay in touch, and I get it. And they're very eager, and this is a tough process, but it's like, if I walked a little old lady across the street yesterday, like, that's really nice of you, but that's not the kind of update we're looking for.
Right. And it's rare that an update really is going to change the outcome of an admissions decision.
I'm glad you said that.
And most people are not sending in updates. So I think it's also important for the listeners to know that this is not something they have to do. This is not like some extra step in the application process.
Yeah,
that
here's
is
a secret. Like if you send an update, to do. Most people are not doing that, and it's not really making a difference. So, certainly if there is some major award that you've won or publication, certainly send that. We're interested in learning about that, but it's not something that is sort of necessary. The AMCAS application is so deep on each one of these individuals that there's so much information in there, we can usually render a decision without the additional update. Right. But like you said, some are very important and worth taking. So, hey, let's talk about the interview day process. So if you make it through the screening process and 2 faculty members have said, yes, we want to meet this person, you get the interview invitation to come to Boston to go interview at Harvard Medical School. Yeah. Boom. Here's your day. What's it like? What can people expect on an interview day at your school?
Sure. So for our Pathways interview day, it's a full day interview experience. And the actual interview portion of it is a very small section of the day. Okay. Our day starts off at about 8:15 in the morning, where we have a faculty member who greets everyone and gives a very quick overview of the program that we offer. And then an admission staff member meets with the candidates as a group to talk about what they can expect on that particular day. On most of our interview days, we offer our candidates the opportunity to sit in on a class. And this is certainly a highlight. Now, unfortunately, it's not available every interview day. We interview we conduct over 70 interview days through the course of our cycle. And our interview cycle runs from early September to mid-January. So we're interviewing about 4 days a week. And so there are days where exams are being offered, or there are experiences that we can't open up to our visiting applicants. And so we always regret that and invite candidates to, if they're going to be back in Boston at another time or their travel plans are flexible, they can certainly sit in on a class on another interview day, or not even an interview day later in the cycle if they don't have the opportunity on their day. And that's a great, opportunity for students to really see the curriculum in person and get to meet our students. I think our interview day might be different than some other schools in that we do have a lot of flexibility, and sort of everybody's schedule on the interview day will differ from one another. So each applicant, they're not going to have the same interview schedule. And so there's a lot of choice that goes on during the interview day itself. So students can sit in on class. They don't have to. Some may have an interview that's scheduled during that time period. So, for the most part, everything except for the actual interview itself is optional. So generally in the morning, we have a class that's offered to students. We will have a session on financial aid, which we know is very important to students. And starting this year, we'll have a video that we will send out to our interviewing candidates beforehand that will go over the financial aid process here at HMS and give them an opportunity to sort of familiarize themselves with the policies and the process, and then come on the interview day and have an opportunity to meet with a member of our financial aid team to sort of ask more specific questions. We also offer a variety of campus tours during the day. Because our students are in class, our first year students, because sort of attendance is required, they're not able to be a tour guide during the morning hours. So we have an admissions staff member who will give a tour in the morning, but then we will offer two separate opportunities to go on tours with generally a first year student in the afternoon hours. So depending on a candidate's schedule for the day, they can choose which tour works best for them in terms of timing. Once our students are done with classes, we have a lunch that our first year students will attend, and we do get lots of students attending that because everybody likes a free lunch. And so we typically have that held in our graduate student lounge, which just provides a really nice, relaxing space for our candidates to come, and they can have, a lunch with our current students, really have an opportunity to, have a breather and take some time to chat with the students. During the day, we also have a session that's led by one of the admissions staff members. I tend to run them a lot of the time. And the session surrounds the curriculum and around student life and living in Boston. So it's an opportunity for us to sort of tell them more about the school and have students ask us questions.
I was going to ask if you're a part of that process, because people are going to hear you on this podcast and then maybe want to know, like, will I get to meet her? Will I see her?
Yeah, so I try to be as visible during the interview days as possible. We do interview a lot, so we're interviewing almost every day of the week. And so there are times when I can't do the info session because I have another meeting or I need to be traveling or whatever the case may be. But I always try to make a point to get out into the halls. And we also have an applicant lounge here within our building where applicants can go and have a place where they can relax. So we have a couch in there, we have a refrigerator, we fill it with snacks and refreshments, and it sort of allows our applicants to have a home away from home, where if they need to get some work done or they need to make a phone call, they need to charge their cell phone, they have a place where they can go and do that and not feel like sort of intimidated by other people saying, who is that person there? Which I think when you're interviewing, when you're new to an environment, you always feel, at least I do, like, maybe where do I really belong? So I will make it a point, usually every morning to walk up there and say hello and greet people. And our office is always open during the interview day. So we will have candidates who will just stop in and
poke their head in.
If they're here and they haven't seen me, definitely stop by the office and say hello.
I want to go back to you said the interview. Did they get one interview on their interview day, or two or more? There are two interviews.
Okay. So for the Pathways interview day, they will have two separate interviews. And so they are one-on-one interviews, and they can be either with two faculty members, or we do have students who participate on our admissions committee, and they are full voting members of our admissions committee. So some of our applicants may actually have a faculty member and a student interviewing them. So separately. The interviews themselves are open file. So that means that the interviewer has already reviewed your application prior to meeting with you. So they have access to the entire AMCAS application.
Okay, good. I'm glad you said that. Is the interview structured at all? Are there certain questions that they have to be asked, or is it kind of a free form? There are things I want to get to, but there's not prescribed questions.
It's not prescribed. We really give our interviewers sort of the latitude to have a meaningful conversation with the applicant. And so, interviewers will try to touch upon some very, basic aspects, but how they go about doing that, the actual questions that they're asking are going to be individual to each interviewer. First and foremost, though, we're not doing stress interviews. We're not trying to, throw applicants off their game or to upset them in any way. Really, it's meant to just be a conversation. And, we also recognize that as much as we are interviewing the applicant is interviewing us too. Sure. They're assessing whether or not we're a good fit for them. And so we really expect them to come with some questions and to really be engaged in the process. I think the other thing to note, I had mentioned that our applicants may have different schedules. So while someone might have an interview at 9:30 and another one at 2:30, the person sitting next to them has one at 11 and one at 4 p.m.
Oh, okay.
So it is a very sort of different experience from some other schools where applicants are sort of being shepherded through the day and sort of taken from one session to the next. We think that gives an opportunity for students to explore and to really see all that HMS has to offer. So we give lots of examples of other things that they can do in terms of other lectures that might be taking place or other areas of interest nearby. And our interviews, while many of them will take place here in the Longwood Medical area, because we have faculty who are at 16 different teaching hospitals, there are some applicants who will leave our campus.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Go off to Mass General or to Faulkner, which is, a hospital a few miles away, to do their interview there. So we give them directions. We set them up with transportation. Really, they just need to sort of get into the car and be taken.
No, cool. Wow.
So it is something for students to be prepared for. And, hopefully it's not a stressful experience for them. Hopefully they see it as an opportunity to just get out and see the city of Boston and to see these amazing, hospitals, which we're fortunate to work with.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So you guys kind of set it up so that there's going to be a car picking you up and taking you to this destination, and don't be rattled by that. This happens 4 days a week.
Exactly. Yeah. And we even give them directions on how to get back and how to arrange for that transportation once they're completed. So,
that's tremendous.
It should be a pretty seamless process.
Do you have any general interview day tips, or when students are coming to interview at HMS, is there something that you would say to them if they say, how should I prepare for this? What should is there one thing that you would express to them? Like, if you're going to prepare, do this one thing to come to interview at our school.
Yeah. It probably sounds kind of silly, but I would say first and foremost, read your application. Make sure that you remember what you put on your application, because I think what sometimes can trip people up is maybe they're not, we'd like to think that they're being honest in their application, but, they may get an interviewer who, their background is in a particular field that they've talked about on their application. And so, of course, that interviewer is going to ask some questions about that. So they should be prepared to talk about what's on their application. And, beyond just sort of what it was and what they did, also what it meant to them and what it means to them in the future and to their future career. It's much more important to talk about sort of what you've learned in an experience than sort of like, well, I did this from this date to this date and I spent about this many hours and this is who I worked with. Yeah. Really sort of take a deeper dive into what it meant for them. Yeah. And then also just, be themselves. Really, we just want to get to know the applicant. And really the interview is the only opportunity for us to do that.
I think I want applicants to know that we understand that interview days can cause stress and nervousness. We expect that. Right. Our job is to try to get to know them, like who they really are. And so we're trying, I think all medical schools, I haven't talked to anybody who says, I love stressing kids out. And nobody says that kind of stuff. And so it's such a big investment on both of our parts for that day that we really want to meet these students and really kind of learn who they are. And will they be this dance is a good fit for us, a good fit for you. And so I'm glad that you said that, because I think we can't emphasize that enough from an admissions perspective, that we really just want to get to know who they are and try to be themselves. Right. That's so reassuring, right? That's a big, give a deep breath there of reassurance. So interview day happens. We have a great day in Boston. I go home and now I'm waiting. What happens after? What happens after the interview day? Do you guys get out your black gowns and go into admission committee rooms and with fire and stuff on the walls and torches?
Well, what I can tell you is that there is a very thoughtful process that goes into actually selecting the class after the interview day. It's really amazing the amount of attention that every applicant who interviews with us receives. What I will say is that our decisions are not rolling. So when you interview with us, whether you interview with us on our first interview day in September or our last interview day in January, it doesn't really matter. It will matter in that the weather is probably going to be different in September than it is in January, but that's Boston for you. Yeah. But in terms of your chances of admission, they don't differ at all. And in fact, all of our admissions decisions are released on the same day in early March. So, we're not sort of sending decisions out every 2 weeks. So if you interview in September, you are not going to hear from us for about 6 months, which can be a very long and stressful time. And we recognize that. But that's sort of how our process works. Mm-hmm. So no news is good news in that regard. If we had any questions or we needed anything, we would get in touch with the applicant, but that's pretty rare. And so all of our decisions are released in early March. And, we generally make some people pretty happy at that point in time.
Do you want to hear from interviewees after their interview with updates? Is that okay?
I think, along the lines of what we were talking about earlier,
Okay.
sure. Most people will send a thank you to their interviewer. It's not required. We have a bulletin board in our office that we like to put the notes that we get from applicants just because it helps remind us why we do what we do.
That's nice.
And so that's always nice for us, but, it's not going to make or break an applicant.
Mhm.
And, if there are substantive updates, certainly submit those. Let us know about them. But as I said before, it's not, in most cases, it's not necessary.
What about an additional letter of recommendation? I think I know what you're going to say, but if I interviewed in September and then I want to submit a recommender said, I'd love to write a letter for you. Can I send an additional letter of recommendation? Is that going to tip the scales? And I bet I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, it's probably not going to make much of a difference. I don't know if that's what you thought I was going to say.
That's what I was thought you were going to say.
But we do get them, and so we're happy to include them. Now, I will say, please don't send 20 additional letters of recommendation our way. But if you have someone who really wants to write on your behalf, certainly they can do so.
I think because I asked that because we get the same question, and I think I want people to know that. Usually the letters of recommendation are typically people are saying glowing things about you. And so it's not like the 7th or 8th or 9th or 10th letter is generally going to tip the scales because we already have so much information. We've met you already, and generally we like you. And now you have another letter of it's a big ask for a letter writer sometimes to take the time to do this. So I just don't know if it's worth it. I kind of struggle with that sometimes.
In most cases, it's probably not. But, I also do recognize that people like to feel like they're doing something.
Yeah.
And so that sometimes gives them the feeling that they are doing something.
Absolutely. That's a good point. One final thing about what happens after admissions committee. So your decisions go out at a date in March. If a student finds out they're on your wait list or alternate list, do you want to hear from them after that point to show that they're still interested in HMS? Is that important to you?
Yeah, we definitely do. And so we encourage candidates who were offered a seat on our waiting list to let us know that they're still interested, of course, because we recognize that they have likely gotten offers from some other great institutions and maybe their plans have changed. So, in fairness of everyone that's on the waiting list, we'd like to know who is really considering us should a seat become available. And likewise, as we were saying, things happen over the course of 6 months. And so, we like to hear what the candidate has been up to, if there have been any, awards or sort of substantive updates that they can provide, they can certainly do that. And we would encourage that.
That's great. Okay. I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think that's a question a lot of people find themselves asking once that spring rolls around, because some schools do not accept updates, others do. And I think it's hard sometimes for students to navigate, like, what do they want? What do they not want? And they don't want to make a mistake and feel like they're screwing it up if they do or don't send an update. And so I get it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned.
And along those lines, they're not, there's no secret to this. They should just use good common sense, really. I've had instances where people will email every single day to reiterate their interest. That's probably excessive. You don't need to do that.
Yeah.
But, once saying I'm still interested is really helpful.
Yeah. And I think too, like, you don't have to go into a whole page long thing of why you're interested. Do you agree with that? I mean, just a short, paragraph that says,
short
hey,
and sweet is perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. I feel like Melissa, we've kind of touched on all the bases of HMS, from the curriculum through the screening process and what you value, and then the interview day and admissions process. Any final thoughts before we transition and answer some listener questions? Is there anything else that you feel like that we didn't touch on this morning.
No, I think you did a really good job. I think we've covered pretty much everything that is the most important.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I'm in. Like I feel like I understand your process pretty thoroughly now. So let's do those listener questions. Do you have those?
Sure.
Yeah,
I do.
Okay,
I do.
so I think today's theme, we kind of have a mixture of questions about personal statements and interview days, or questions about interview days. So, can I ask you the first one?
Sure.
Okay, so this first one comes from a listener. Her name is Alexis, and she's from Norfolk State University. And here's her question for you. She says, I've been looking for people to review my personal statement, and I know some people post them on online forums like Reddit and others. I'm hesitant to do this, but it seems like a lot of people do it. As admissions deans or directors, do you think this is okay to seek advice there?
That's a good question, Christian, and maybe I'm dating myself and showing my age, or maybe I'm not as embracing this sort of online community that seems to exist now. But I'm sort of the mindset that a personal statement is just that. It's personal. So it's hard to ask strangers for advice on your personal statement. It's one thing if you're asking for advice about grammar, or, punctuation, things like that. But the personal statement is one of, really only a few places in the AMCAS application where an applicant is able to have their voice come out. And so I think a personal statement should be, reviewed by people who are close to the applicant. Then there's also, some concerns about, honesty and things like that. So I would probably err on the side of caution and not advise an applicant to post it online. I don't know. I'm interested in what you would say.
I agree 100% with you. I feel like Alexis sounds like her gut's telling her this may not be a good idea, but everybody else is doing it, or a lot of people are doing it. So is it that, what's wrong with that? And I worry about people's qualifications that are reading these or providing advice. Unless they've been on our end, or they're a pre-health advisor in that, or maybe like they know the student well from an English class or something, or just somebody who knows the student well. The advice that you're getting may not be accurate.
Right.
And it may change. They may want to change your personal statement in a way that doesn't reflect then who you really are, or what you're trying to convey to people that are going to read these at the medical school level. I'm with you. I kind of like putting it out there for strangers to weigh in on. You don't know who these people are and what their motivations are, what their qualifications are. So I worry about that.
Yeah. Sounds like we're on the same page.
Yeah. I think Alexis would be better off trying to seek some advice, like you said, from people that she knows well that know her well, that could probably benefit her a little bit better than putting it out there in the interwebs.
Yes. I agree.
Do you have one for me?
I do. So this comes from Sean, who is from the California Institute of Technology. And he says, hi, I love this show. I've been working hard on crafting my personal statement. It's always nice to get to hear that. And he writes, so he's been working hard on crafting his personal statement. And he says, I don't mean any disrespect, but do admissions committee members really read them during the screening process? Does someone or people on the admissions committee read through the whole application after an interview?
I love his, I'm just going to put it out there. Do people really read these things?
Yeah.
I love it because I get it. Like the words personal statement, I think sometimes causes a lot of angst in people because it's like a blank piece of paper and you're supposed to develop this literary piece of art that, will bring you to an interview or something. And do we really read them? And Sean, I can tell you they're read. I would have to say
Yes.
I read multiple times by different reviewers, by interviewers, by admissions committee members. Now, can Melissa and I speak to every medical school in the United States? No. But I
Right.
think we know our community well enough to know that, yeah, we're pouring through these applications and reading everything. And so we're trust the system, I guess, trust
Yes.
the process that they are being read. Your work is not your work's worth it.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, at HMS, where we, as I was saying before, by the time someone gets to an interview, they've had a handful of people already read their application, and then even more so after the interview. So, yeah, it's definitely something that is read and so should be taken seriously.
Yeah. So keep working hard on it, Shauna. Your work's gonna pay off. It will be read.
Eventually, yes, it will pay off, and it will be read.
And I think medical students, if somebody's accepted in medical school, they're one of the most well-vetted people to go into a school or into some type of profession, because they have to go through so many layers of this process. It's a very long and somewhat inhumane application process.
It is. But it's for a very good reason. They have, lots of responsibility and privilege given to them just by a nature of a career in medicine. So it's important that we do all of this vetting up front.
Yep. Okay, Melissa, here's one for you. The student's name is Lauren, and she's from the University of Pittsburgh. And she says, okay, I have a unique situation that I want to bounce off the admissions people on your show, please. I turned down an acceptance last year for a variety of reasons. She says, the academic, for one, wasn't for me. Do you think this is something I should address in my personal statement in my next application? I'm still very dedicated and passionate about medicine. So,
yeah, that's a really good question. I would give credit to Lauren for making what had to have been an incredibly difficult decision for her to turn down an admissions offer because she didn't feel like it was a good fit. I think she did, what we hope all applicants would do, and making the decision that's best for themselves, but also best for that institution as well, because it's not good for anyone to have a student who isn't happy and doesn't feel like it's a good fit. I think what's important to know in with the AMCAS application is that a school will know when a candidate is reapplying. So if they've submitted an application in the past, that is flagged on the application. So, it's likely that she's going to get a question about that, of sort of what happened. And, they may not know that there was an offer that was made, but she should probably err on the side of disclosing this and being honest. Now, I wouldn't suggest that she apply to that same school again, because chances are not much has changed. If she turned them down one year, then it's probably not a good use of her time and resources, and also that of that other schools. But I don't think that should preclude her from applying to other schools. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. I think with you again, 100%. I would give a nod to it, and certainly maybe go into a little bit of detail of just be honest. I'm in a unique situation. I'm reapplying, and here's a little bit of the reasons why, but then maybe move on and talk about what's changed since your previous application, maybe what you learned, but like Lauren said, I'm still very dedicated and passionate about medicine. I mean, clearly she is. She turned down an acceptance offer, but she's reapplying to medical school. And I think there's a lot of credit there for her to, I mean, that's a big decision, like you said, to turn down an acceptance offer, because the national acceptance rate's less than 50%. It's like 40% or something like that. So that's a big, I bet she wrestled with that. Yeah, I bet she really wrestled with that. But I'm with you. I think she should be prepared to at least put it out there a little bit, and then be prepared to talk about it potentially in an interview. And I think if somebody's listening and is thinking like, well, why did she apply to that school if she ultimately turned it down? And I think in Lauren's defense, if somebody's thinking that, is that I think applicants do their best to learn as much as they can about a medical school on primarily websites. And sometimes it's not till you get there and start meeting, do the interview day where you're getting the vibe and you're learning how it really works and the nuts and bolts of the curriculum and meeting people and talking to medical students there that, sometimes I think students probably walk away going, it was okay, but I don't know if I could see myself going there for a variety of reasons or something like that. And who knows the situation? Maybe the acceptance came back so quickly. Sometimes maybe she came right before an admissions committee or something that she didn't have time to withdraw.
Right. There's a number of things that could have happened. And I think, like you said, it's very easy hypothetically to think, sure, I'll apply to this school. And if I get accepted, I'd want to go there. But like you said, and like we talked about earlier, the interview day is as much an opportunity for an applicant to interview a school as it is for the school to interview the applicant. And so sometimes, it might not be a good fit after attending the interview day. And then there's also, everything else that goes on, because it's important to know that you're not applying to medical school in a vacuum. Everything else in your life is going on at the same time too.
Good point.
And so, there's a lot of different things that could be weighing in on this decision-making process. So, it sounds like she made the right decision for her at the time, and that should be commended.
That's good stuff. All right. Let's see. I just read you one. Am I up next?
Okay. I can go. So this next question comes from Drew at the University of Central Florida. And it goes, I've heard of people bringing resumes, personal statements, research, abstracts, etc. I was wondering what people bring to interviews. And also, will interviewers know my GPA and MCAT score? Okay. So I'll answer the second question first, at least for HMS, but I will say it differs from school to school. So we have an open file interview, so your interviewers will know your GPA and your MCAT scores, as well as everything else that's in the application. In terms of what to bring to the interview itself, it's really not necessary to bring anything. We ask I will make one caveat. We ask our students who are coming for an interview to bring a form that we give them ahead of time, and we ask them to fill it out. So if you're interviewing at HMS, bring that. But it's really not necessary to bring anything else, at least here in our process, because an interviewer has access to your application. So, anything you put on a resume is something that they're already going to have access to. So, there's nothing that you need to bring. If you're coming to HMS for an interview, dress appropriately, dress for the weather, bring some good walking shoes because you will be taking a tour of the campus. But in terms of resumes and personal statements, that's not necessary.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, what would you bring? I think I see a lot of students bring a portfolio that maybe has like a piece of notepad and like notebook paper in there to take notes. Sometimes schools will give you a folder that have documents in it, maybe some scratch paper kind of thing. But you're welcome to bring a list of your own questions for the medical school.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, bring a notebook with a bunch of questions that you want to have asked, or you want to ask and get answers throughout the day. Something else a little, this is a little obscure, but maybe like some Motrin or Tylenol or something that in case you get a headache or maybe you don't feel, because it can be stressful, maybe cause like a headache, but I think it's important to maybe mention that we can't dispense, or we're not supposed to dispense Motrin or, Tylenol, that kind of thing. Do you guys do that? I mean, if somebody says, hey, I've got a bad headache, do you have any Motrin?
I haven't been told we shouldn't.
Okay. Maybe that was somebody that, I think somebody at our school is hesitant in doing that. So they're like, just don't do it. Like, okay, we'll give you a Band-Aid if you get a blister on the back of your ankle or something. But
Yeah.
But maybe
bring a good book, bring something, for our process, there are, we do have a lot going on our interview day, but there might be occasion where you're sitting around waiting. So, it's okay to bring, if you have homework, if you're still in school and you're working on a paper, or, you have to do some reading for the class, bring that, or just bring, reading for pleasure, or whatever you do to sort of relax.
Right.
I've seen, applicants bring knitting, and they'll be sitting in our applicant lounge knitting. That's a good way to sort of relax and take your mind off of things. But, in terms of actual stuff to give your interviewers, at least here, that's not really necessary.
You mentioned like dress appropriately, and I think that's so important for schools in the upper Midwest and Northeast, and that get seasons. You should check the weather before you come to a location. Because bring an umbrella. We've had students come for interview days and they didn't have an umbrella, and they show up here. It might be raining that morning, and you start off the day kind of soaked, and that's not fun.
Yeah. So, no, that's not. We do have umbrellas in our office that we loan out to people. On the interview day,
if they're traveling to
we can help out with
hospitals.
That, but. If they're coming, in the morning, it's important to just, be mindful of the fact that the weather that we have here may not be the same as the weather that you're traveling from.
Yeah. And this might sound cheesy, but bring real self, not fake self. Like you said earlier when we were talking, like be yourself and be ready to be who you are that day. Don't bring some fake persona that you're trying to be somebody that you probably really aren't. Your friends or your family might go like, what are you doing? You're acting so weird. So bring real self. Bring real self.
Be genuine.
Yep.
Be genuine.
Okay. I have the last question here is Stephanie from Bowdoin College. That's up in Maine.
Yep.
Am I saying that correctly?
Bowdoin College.
Bowdoin.
That's okay.
Yep. I got my first interview invitation. Yay. She says, yay. And she says, but now I'm freaking out. If you and your admissions guest could give me one piece of advice for the interview day, what would it be?
Well, first of all, Stephanie, congratulations for getting an interview invitation. That's a pretty big deal. Secondly, my piece of advice would be to just take a deep breath and relax. Really the interview day, like we have been saying over and over again, is just a chance for you to get to know the school a little bit better, and to really be yourself. So there's no sort of one thing that we're looking for. We're just looking to get to know you. So it's not really anything to stress out over too much. Although we know applicants do that.
Yeah, we know it can cause stress and nervousness, but I would say, Stephanie, try to have fun. Try to enjoy the process. You're getting to travel potentially to a different city where you might end up living someday. Try to enjoy it. Like kind of soak it up. It is a big, like Melissa said, it's a big deal. Congratulations, and try to enjoy the process. Yeah. Cool.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've kind of reached the end of our discussion here. Melissa, any kind of final thoughts, any final recommendations you would have for people that are listening about applying to medical school, or resources that are out there that they may or may not, or may need to be reminded about?
Well, I think we covered a lot in our call today, but one thing I would encourage applicants to do is to get to know the pre-health advisor at their undergraduate institution if they haven't done so already. This office, this individual is a great resource for applicants, and really should be utilized. And if a student, an applicant, is out of school, or perhaps their school doesn't have a pre-med advisor, they can go on and request an advisor through the National Association of Advisors to the Health Professions. And, this resource is invaluable. So really, I like to encourage applicants to really utilize the advisors at their institutions as much as possible.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I will put a link to that. It's called the NAHP. To their website and to that, a link to that page where if students, like you said, don't have access to an advisor, there are some volunteer advisors in that community that will communicate with the student to help them along. And I think it's important to mention that we med school admissions groups, people go to those same conferences as the pre-health advisors. So we're sharing the same kind of information and language. And so the information that your pre-health advisor that they're sharing with you is generally the same stuff we would be telling you if you were to be able to talk to us. So I think that that's something that's important to mention. So I'm really glad, Melissa, that you brought that up. Thanks again for doing this with me. I've had a whole lot. This has been fun. I knew we were going to have a good time, and it hasn't disappointed. So I really appreciate all the time, Melissa, that you've given today. This has been so cool.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully this was helpful to get a better sense of what we offer here at HMS, as well as some tips for applying to medical school in general.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Melissa. Great. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Christian. Bye-bye.
Bye. There you go. Harvard Medical School in the books. I'm just going to let that sit there. I don't think I have anything left to say about this one, except thank you to Melissa Friedman for giving us all the time that she did. She rocked the mic. Hey, until next time, see you again, everybody.